Caffeine is still kicking in today. Hey, welcome back to Spellbound. It's me, BEEJ, and the past several videos have been all different kinds of summer TBRs. I talked about sunny summer TBRs that were like light and fluffy, mostly romances. I talked about a pirate TBR, I had a mermaid TBR, a summerween TBR, and then like a very, very epic summer TBR. So I've been doing a lot of summer reading, and this is the first of my wrap-ups, and most of the ones on this list are the sunny, the light and fluffy, just the good time, good vibes bunch of books. And we're starting off strong with Tourist Season by Brynne Weaver. So this book is by the author of the Butcher and Blackbird series, which to be honest, I have never read, but I just thought that the premise sounded so cute. So this is about a girl who is a serial killer in her small town. Now, first disclaimer, I don't really read serial killer books. That's really not my vibe. I don't really know why serial killers are having such a moment right now. I don't want to yuck anyone's yums, but it's really just not for me. So no one was more surprised than I was that I was interested in a serial killer book, but also no one was more surprised than I was that I liked it, but we're not there yet. Because this is a serial killer, like it's a dark comedy. And I think that it does this really well. It does the elements of dark romance really well, and it does elements of a rom-com very well. So the execution of this was, again, I'm getting ahead of myself, but the execution was really well done. So first of all, she's a serial killer. She does have a moral code. She only kills bad guys, like rapists and offenders of sexual assault, men. They live in this town called Cape Carnage, which is, they really lean into the morbidity of that theme, and they have all different kinds. They have like a corpse building contest and other sorts of like seasonal activities in this town. So because of that, like everyone really leans into that, because this town used to be home to a very, very famous serial killer who was never found. That's what she's about. And then suddenly this guy comes to town, and he has a past, and he is also a serial killer, except he's not indiscriminate. He has a hit list. He was in a car accident when he was younger, and that car accident took his brother. He's on a quest for revenge against the drivers, the teen drivers who took his brother from him in that car accident. And he has been making his way down his list. The last name on the list is her. So already you have a really, really strong, really, really tense built-in enemies to lovers setup, and you have two serial killers who are at play and orbiting around each other in this very, very small town. I do not usually like small town romances, mostly because they usually have a lot of, I was going to say undertones, but that's actually not true. They usually just have a lot of themes of conservative values that I reject with extreme prejudice. And this one does not. This one is a very touristy town. So a lot of those themes and elements aren't really at play, which is delightful and refreshing. And so this one, I was very, very surprised. I was pleasantly surprised. It was such a good time. It was such a good time, in fact, that I immediately ran out and bought the sequel, called Harvest Season, which is right here in the corner of the camera. Harvest Season. So I hope it is just as good. I hear that it's going to be a trilogy, but who knows? I had a really good time with this. I would recommend it. I don't remember what I rated it. It was high for a rom-com, so probably like a 4.5, honestly. This was very good. And then after that, I read Till Summer Do Us Part. I was excited to dive into it because the premise sounded insane, which are my favorite types of rom-coms. I don't want to read about anything realistic in a rom-com. This girl, she loves her job as a copy editor or copywriter or something, but she works at this place, but she's like the only girl, and it's a total sausage fest, and everyone there is married, and she calls them all like Brads and Chads. She's recovering from a divorce and getting back on her feet, and she just feels really out of place in this like very pro-marriage environment. One day, she just lets it slip, blah, 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 well, my husband, blah, blah, blah. And they call her out on this immediately, one of the Brads or Chads, and he's like, you're not married. And she's like, yes, I am. And he's like, then how come we've never seen a wedding ring? And she's like, well, you nosy bitch, it's because we're actually going through a lot of problems right now, so back off. Then her boss, whom she admires tremendously, pulls her aside and she's like, listen, I actually know a really, really like highly recommended, highly recognized marriage counselor, and it's her boss's husband. So first of all, major conflict of interest, but I'm like, this is so insane. Like, yes, I'm already invested. So she goes to see this marriage counselor. Well, first, she gets a friend of a friend and kind of, she doesn't hire him, but she asks a huge favor of a stranger to be like, hey, can you pretend to be my horrible husband for me and get me out of this like lie so that we look unsavable and I can kind of back out of this lie. Except she didn't really tell him the entire story because she didn't want to look crazy. So she was just kind of hoping for a one and done thing. Well, it turns out that the friend of a friend, he really loves improv and he's bored. And so he decided to fully commit to the bit. So instead of looking like an unsavable marriage, every time that she would go really hard in one direction and look unsavable, he would go even further to meet her and be like, I'll do anything to save this marriage. You just tell me. And he's like looking extra lovey and extra dovey. And she's like, the fuck are you doing? So the marriage counselor is like, look, y'all are in dire straits, but I think with some really intense commitment, we can get you there. If you come to my like marriage boot camp essentially, and it's a week long and it's, you know, in the woods, whatever. And so she's like, I don't think so. And the husband, the fake husband, is like, yes, we will be there. So she's like, hey, stranger, you just committed to come to this like marriage boot camp. I don't want to come. And then it turns out that everyone from the office is also there, which again, massive conflicts of interest and like major HR flags all over the place, like insane, whatever. So anyway, so they do. Now, this premise is absolutely absurd and I was so here for it. But the problem was, I don't have the book, so I can't show you because I immediately unhauled it when I was done. I was crushed at how disappointed I was with this book because the premise was so there. And honestly, there were 2 scenes in this book that had me laughing out loud. And I immediately had to go find Brett to like go read to him and be like, just because I wanted to share the funny, because it was so funny. The improv scenes like with the marriage counselor were hysterical and they were written so well. And they were written like in montage, as if it was like a movie. It was really, really good, really well done. The problem was everything else. The problem was actually describing the process of them going through this marriage boot camp. She unwound the tension too early, in my opinion. I thought it was going to be a frustration of like not enemies to lovers, because they're not enemies, but they're working at odds, right? Like she's trying to end this marriage and he's trying to save it. And if that thread had continued, it would have been much funnier, much more, yeah, it would have been much funnier through the book longer. Instead, that tension is resolved very quickly, and then they become friends, and then they become lovers because we're actually watching a couple go through marriage boot camp. And half of that is them learning each other and learning to work together, which once they're no longer at odds, isn't that exciting. And also we're watching her process her divorce after the fact with a different guy. So it was like very emotional too, but it seemed misplaced because it was like, bestie, shouldn't you have worked through this a long time ago? And maybe that's just how life works, which is fine, but I don't want to read about it, you know? And so the book was entirely too long. And because of all of those, they weren't distractions. That was the plot of the book, unfortunately. And everything that I was talking about and what I liked about the book ended up being a deviation from that. And that's just disappointing. I desperately wanted to like this book, but I just ultimately didn't. A lot of the things didn't make sense. And then once it became that type of realistic, it was really hard for the author to go back and then write the absurdity in, because she had already gone too far into making this feel like a legitimate marriage counseling camp, processing real feelings, processing real trauma from emotional abuse and neglect from a husband, like all of that. And then you're trying to like write this nonsense scene, like the tension's not there, the vibes aren't right, and the mood is gone. So ultimately, like the book really, really fell flat in that regard, and it made me not interested in any more from this author, which was such a huge bummer because man, that book could have been something. So that is my full review. What a disappointment. I don't remember what I've read it, what I rated it. It's been too long at this point. Next is Lore Olympus by Rachel Smith. I have talked about this several different times on my channel because this is a mega long series and it's a webtoon series. So it's a comic and it's tremendous. So this is the story of Persephone and Hades. Persephone is pink and Hades is blue. It is delightful, like delightfully colorful through the entire series. I love this. It's just pretty to look at, but it's also really well written. I am forever grateful to Bestie Caitlin for putting me on to Lore Olympus years and years ago, like a core memory of that conversation when she first told me about it and showed it to me, because I have loved it ever since, and I always go get the new release the day that it comes out. So this is a really, really beautifully illustrated story, like I said, of Hades and Persephone with a lot of imagination to it. They're able through, obviously because it's drawn, to depict how they are both ancient and also very modern day. It's about Persephone as she's coming of age, and she's been brought up to be part of the goddesses of eternal virginity or sisterhood or something, but basically it's a virginity pledge. It's about her discovering herself, and she goes down to the underworld for an internship, and that's where she falls in love with Hades. And there's a lot here that you can tell now that this is volume 10 out of 11. Through the summer, I've read 7, 8, and 9 are the 3 that I have read so far, and then I want to read 10 before the 11th and final book comes out in a couple of months. I think it comes out in September. This is just an update on the series. It has developed into something so rich. The world is so well built, and there's so much lore, actual lore, put into it that you can tell that the author has really done a tremendous amount of story work on this series in a way that I wanted to just spend some time appreciating. This is a delightful series. They're obviously not hard to read because they're comics, but they are well edited and well curated into these book collections to further the story along. And the story, like I said, has become, it's not unfocused. It has still like a very, very strong plot line, but there are enough subplots in here that weave together that make this story feel really, really well developed. So this has been a really delightful break from a lot of the other books that I've read this summer that still have really heartwarming vibes. Their romance is just so cute. They as characters are very cute. There was a lot of pining in the first couple of books. They've kind of worked that out, which has been nice to see. And now it's just them working together and them being in cahoots. And so I really love this series. Okay, and then Slow Burn Summer by Josie Silver. I wanted to like this one too, obviously. This has a cute premise. So it's about this, what is she? She's a divorcee, but she is a previous actress, like a soap actress, and she's looking for work. And the first thing that she's hired to do is actually with a publishing company, where this company has just published the first book of a divorced screenwriter. And he's kind of an asshole though. And so they need someone to play the part of the author, almost like a ghostwriter, except she didn't write anything. She's just pretending to be the author during the press tour so that the book will become a commercial success. Neat premise, except there once again was not enough tension to make this silly goose premise make sense. They don't dislike each other enough. It's not that yes, I always want animosity. I really do. And I always want high tension, and I always want violence if possible. And I know what I'm getting into when I pick up this book, but even from the back of the book, it's like when Kate and Charlie meet, they're all friction and sparks, and it's like, they're not. They are actually not. There are no sparks on the page, and there's barely any friction. He's like, I don't know about hiring a divorcee, and she's like, I don't know about this weird gig. But it has nothing to do with each other. They're just kind of mutually unpleasant. She is unpleasant because she has low self-esteem on account of the divorce, and he's unpleasant because he has low self-esteem on account of his divorce. And so it's just like, I don't know, man, maybe they can learn to work together, and I hope that they do, but I won't know about it because I DNF'd it, which is just a huge bummer. Maybe you'll like this book. I don't know. I feel like it's British. I forget everything I read. And I know that sounds dramatic. I do, but it's not. It's not hyperbolic. I'm not exaggerating. I forget everything I read. And so I did read half of this book, and I genuinely don't remember anything about it. I remember that I was disappointed. I think that they are British because I read 2 British books that I was both disappointed by this year. And so this had to have been the other one. There's something about British humor, I think, that I just don't find funny. And it's not like a diss against British humor. It's just not what I'm specifically looking for. I'm looking for absolutely absurd American nonsense. The absurdity doesn't reach the levels that I'm looking for, I think. I'm thinking of How to Lose a Guy in 10 Days type of nonsense. They're just too dignified. They're not willing to be as ridiculous as I need them to be in order to have the type of humor payoff that I'm looking for. So instead, they're maybe sarcastic to each other, but not even in a way that breeds animosity, just in a sort of passive aggressive way, which isn't fun to read to me. So maybe you'll like this book. If so, I hope you do. It's on my Pango for very cheap. Haunted Ever After by Jen DeLuca. This was my first by this author, and I believe that she's local because she writes a lot of local Florida stuff. This is about a girl who moves to, she moves to the Keys from Orlando. And one of the Keys, she moves to Boneyard Key, which is a very like ghost beach town, and the town really leans into the ghostiness of it. And so this is about her romance with this guy. Is it love or will one of them get ghosted? Is the tagline. So I should have known. I should have. The thing is, this wasn't poorly written. It was, for an indie book, it was quite delightful. Maybe it isn't. Oh shit, this is not indie romance. This is Berkeley. This is Penguin. Wow. Haunted Ever After by Jen DeLuca. I don't know why I have it in my head that this author is local, but maybe that's just because it feels local to me, because it's about a woman who moves from Orlando, where I live, to Boneyard Key, Florida, which is a very ghosty town. It's a town that really leans into its like haunted vibes. There's a lot of ghost tours, etc. And this woman, she buys a house that it's a stop on this ghost tour. It's been in the neighborhood lore for generations. It is well known to be haunted, etc. And so it's about her just like living here and getting accustomed to this small town. There was nothing wrong with this book. I actually don't have legitimate criticisms of the book. I just DNF'd it because it isn't for me. So my negative review of this book has nothing to do with this author. I actually think a lot of people, and a lot of people that I know, would like it very much. This one really does have too much of those small town vibes for me. The idea that you would move from Orlando to like a different place that has almost the same things but not the benefits of Orlando feels very strange to me. But that's what she wanted. And so it's a lot of fix-em-ups, and it's a lot of trips to the coffee shop to meet the guy. And honestly, if this hadn't had romance in it, I might have liked it more. But because she's trying to sell me on this relationship with this guy, once again, just like the last one, there wasn't enough tension in the beginning to warrant sticking around for me, because they weren't at odds. They were just rude to each other. And that is just two unpleasant characters in the same room. That's not real tension, because it's resolved as soon as one of them takes a nap. That's it. Like there was no connection point. There was no banter. There was no tension. There were no stakes either, which feels like difficult. Like it's really just her moving to a new town. Like it feels very much like the opening montage of a movie, but I read till like 40 or 50% of this book. And I was like, but what happens if it doesn't work out? And we don't know, because there's just not a lot of stakes happening. So that's my opinion. I didn't enjoy it. I hope that you will. Once again, it's on Pango. But we're ending on a very good, very strong note with Beneath the Sugar Sky by Seanan McGuire. This is the third in the Wayward Children series that starts with Every Heart a Doorway. This series is incredible. It is masterful. It's a series of novellas. They are very short. They're compulsively readable. And even though this is my sunny summer wrap-up, it is heartwarming. But it's not light and fluffy necessarily. This book and this book series has a whimsical, melancholy tone, which is a very rare, very difficult to execute type of combination. So this is about, like the book series is about a school that exists for children. Duh. But it's children who have gone through doorways or portals to other worlds. So the cleanest example, think Alice in Alice in Wonderland. What happened when she came back to the real world after experiencing Wonderland? She might have been a little crazy. She might have been a little misunderstood by her peers, like for all that she was talking about. And more than anything, she was probably at some or a few points in her life rather desperate to get back to Wonderland, because at least there she felt more understood maybe, or that the world was more suited to her in some way, because she did kind of dream it up. So similarly, there's a lot of characters that we know from stories that are present in this book about what happens when they came back from their stories. But there's also a lot of made-up characters who have had their own adventures in their own worlds. And this is about them coming back to a world that doesn't adjust to them and that they can't seem to adjust back to the world. So that's where they go to this school. And in this school, the teacher, Eleanor, kind of helps them readjust and also helps them look for their doors, because that's all ultimately that they want, is because that door opened to that person for a reason. And so they want to get back to this world. That's why it has kind of like a very high whimsy, very high melancholy vibe, because none of the kids want to be here. You know, they want to be elsewhere desperately. These also have a high degree, not a high degree, they have a low degree, a mid-low degree of violence in them, but it's a non-zero element of violence, which is why I love it. So, and each one takes you to a different world. So the first one mostly takes place at the school and is about a girl trying to get back to her world. And so she discovers that in order to get to a similar world, that happens when death occurs. So she actually kills another of her fellow students to get there. So they can get dark. The second one is about Jack and Jill, and they are actually from a very Frankenstein-esque type of world that's very dark and very like lightning heavy and experimental mad scientist kind of vibes. Very neat. This is Beneath the Sugar Sky, and it is about a confection land. Like the land is called, the world is called Confection, and it is a nonsensical world with a middling moral code, but its lore is that it was like created by bakers and they're constantly cooking things in the oven, and because like through the oven they can birth life, they try to bring one of their friends back from the dead by bringing it to Confection to hopefully save Confection. It is full of candy and whimsy and sugar clouds, and just it is the most delightful pastel world to spend time in. There are stakes in these books, which is why I like them, because I wouldn't call them cozy, because what defines cozy is a lack of stakes, which is why I don't like it. As a vibe, as a concept, I have tried and read cozy all over the place. And as it turns out, I just don't like cozy books. I like stakes. I like for the characters to feel like they're in peril, because I want their story to mean something. And that is what's so relevant about these novellas, is that they have the highest stakes to these kids. They are desperate to return to their worlds. They're desperate to belong and to feel finally understood. I just love it. The characters that have been developed for this book series are really wonderful, but more than anything, it's the worlds and the power of stories that's going to get you invested. So those were 6 books that I read this summer that had mostly heartwarming, happy vibes to them, and that were really, really excellent choices for poolside reading or beach reads. I hope that at least a few of them I know that I shat on a few of them. I'm not gonna lie. Some of those were on recommendations, and that's okay. Not everything I read is going to be endorsed, you know what I mean? But also I do know that a lot of times some of the best books that I have ever read and some of my favorite books I've ever read I have picked up because I listened or read a negative review of that book, and I was like, oh, I know that that's for me then. So I do believe in negative reviews. I don't think even in the negative reviews that I had that a couple of them were definite criticisms of the book, but in other instances, it really came down to personal preference. So what about you? What have you read this summer? And more specifically, what have you read this summer that you didn't like? You know, and tell me why you didn't like it. Because like I said, I believe in the power of a negative review, but also believe in the power of a positive review. And I read some really, really great books this summer. So thanks so much for sticking around. As always, take care, drink your water, fight fascism, and happy reading.